Chapter 1. The Storm's Prey. The storm had been my salvation until it became my trap. I pressed my back against the rough bark of an ancient pine, rain slicing through the canopy above like frozen daggers. My wedding dress, what remained of it, clung to my skin in tatters, the delicate lace now mud-stained and torn from 3 hours of running through the wilderness. The designer heels had been abandoned miles ago, leaving my feet bloody and numb against the forest floor. Keep moving, Arya. Don't stop. Never stop. The headlights that had been hunting me through the winding mountain roads were gone now, swallowed by the maze of trees and the howling wind. But I knew Marcus wouldn't give up. Men like him never did, especially when their pride had been wounded in front of 200 wedding guests. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the forest in stark, terrifying detail. For a moment I could see the path ahead, a narrow deer trail winding deeper into the mountains, away from civilization, away from safety, but also away from him. I pushed off from the tree, my bare feet slipping on the wet pine needles. The storm was getting worse, turning the mountain into a death trap of mud and debris. Part of me wondered if I'd simply traded one nightmare for another. But dying out here, free, seemed preferable to living as Marcus Blackwood's captive wife. The thought of his hands on me, the way he'd grabbed my wrist during the ceremony when I'd hesitated to say my vows, sent fresh adrenaline coursing through my veins. I'd run then, right there at the altar, hiking up my train and bolting for the chapel doors, while the entire congregation sat in stunned silence. You can't hide from me forever, Arya. His voice echoed in my memory, cold and possessive. You belong to me. The contract ensures it. Not anymore. I'd burned that bridge along with everything else. Another flash of lightning, and this time I saw something that made my blood freeze. Eyes. Golden eyes reflecting the storm's light, watching me from the shadows between the trees. Not human eyes. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering against my ribs. The eyes didn't blink. Didn't move. Just watched. Calculating. Predatory. Wolf. It had to be a wolf. The rational part of my mind tried to remember what I'd learned about wildlife encounters. Make yourself look big, don't run, don't make eye contact. But the terrified part, the part that had been running on pure survival instinct for hours, screamed at me to move. I took a careful step backward, then another. The eyes followed my movement but didn't advance. Maybe if I could just... My foot caught on a fallen branch, sending me tumbling down a steep embankment. Pain exploded through my shoulder as I hit a boulder. Then my world went dark as my head connected with something hard and unforgiving. Consciousness returned slowly, carried, on waves of warmth that seemed impossible given the storm I'd been running through. I was lying on something soft, a bed maybe, and the air around me smelled of cedar and smoke. And something else. Something wild and masculine that made my pulse quicken for reasons I couldn't name. I kept my breathing steady, my eyes closed, trying to assess the situation without alerting whoever had found me. The storm was still raging outside. I could hear it battering against windows, but I was dry now and warm and, oh God, I was wearing different clothes. My wedding dress was gone, replaced by what felt like an oversized flannel shirt and soft cotton pants. Someone had undressed me. Someone had seen me vulnerable and unconscious, and you're safe. The voice was deep, rough around the edges like whiskey and smoke. It came from somewhere to my left, and despite its quiet tone, it seemed to fill the entire room with its presence. I opened my eyes slowly, letting them adjust to the flickering firelight. The room was rustic but clean. Log walls, a stone fireplace, simple furniture that looked handmade. And sitting in a chair near the fire, watching me with the same golden eyes I'd seen in the forest, was the most dangerous-looking man I'd ever encountered. He was tall. Even sitting down I could tell. Broad shoulders filled out a simple black sweater, and dark hair fell across his forehead in a way that suggested he didn't much care about appearances. There was something wild about him, something that made the civilized part of my brain issue, warning signals, but it was his eyes that held me captive. The same golden eyes from the forest, now clearly, impossibly human. They studied me with an intensity that made me feel exposed, as if he could see straight through to my soul. "Who are you?" My voice came out as barely a whisper, my throat raw from the cold and rain. "Kieran." He leaned forward slightly, and I caught that wild scent again. Pine and leather and something purely masculine. "And you're trespassing." I was running. The words slipped out before I could stop them, and I saw something shift in his expression. "From the storm?" "No." His voice was certain, absolute. "You were running from something else, something that put that fear in your eyes." I sat up slowly, ignoring the way my head spun. The movement made the oversized shirt slide off one shoulder, and I saw his gaze flick to the exposed skin before returning to my face. There was something almost protective in that look. "Where are my clothes?" "Destroyed. You were hypothermic. When I found you..." He stood then, and I was right. He was tall, probably 6'4", with the kind of lean muscle that spoke of real strength rather than gym vanity. "Your dress was soaked through, and you'd been bleeding." I touched my temple, gingerly, and felt the tender spot where I'd hit my head during the fall. You undressed me?" Something flickered in those golden eyes. Regret, maybe, or something else I couldn't identify. "I kept you alive. Nothing more." The way he said it, with such quiet certainty, made me believe him. But it also raised more questions. "Why?" "You don't know me. I could be anyone. You could be." He moved to the fireplace, adding another log with economical movements. "But you're not. You're someone who ran so far from whatever was chasing you that you nearly died in a storm rather than turn back." The accuracy of his assessment hit me like a physical blow. I pulled my knees up to my chest, suddenly feeling very small in the large bed. "I can't go back." "Then don't." The simple words, spoken without judgment or question, nearly broke me. After months of being told what I should do, what I owed to my family's reputation, what was expected of me, having someone simply accept my choice felt like a miracle. "It's not that simple," I whispered. Kieran turned from the fire to face me fully, and in the flickering light, his features looked carved from stone. Beautiful, but hard. Dangerous. "It is," he said. "If you're strong enough to make it so." Thunder crashed overhead, shaking the cabin's windows. In the distance, I thought I heard something else. A sound that might have been howling, but could have been just the wind. "The storm," I said, suddenly remembering. I saw eyes in the forest. Golden eyes like... I trailed off, staring at him. His expression didn't change, but something in the air between us shifted. Became charged, electric. "Like mine?" he asked quietly. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Kieran was silent for a long moment, studying me with those impossible eyes. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful, controlled. "Mountain storms bring out all kinds of wild things, Arya." The sound of my name on his lips sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with cold. "I didn't tell you my name." "No," he agreed. "You didn't." The fire crackled between us, filling the silence with its ancient rhythm. Outside, the storm raged on, trapping me in this cabin with a man who somehow knew my name, who had eyes like the wolf I'd seen in the forest, and who made me feel safer than I had in months. I should have been terrified. Instead, I found myself leaning forward, drawn by something I couldn't name, "What are you?" I whispered. Kieran's smile was sharp as a blade, beautiful and dangerous. That, little runaway, is exactly the wrong question to ask. Chapter 2. Unspoken truths. The storm showed no signs of letting up by morning. I woke to the sound of rain still hammering against the cabin's windows and the distant rumble of thunder that seemed to shake the very foundations of the mountain. Kieran was gone from the chair by the fire, but I could hear movement in what I assumed was the kitchen, the quiet clink of dishes, the whisper of bare feet on wooden floors. I sat up slowly, testing my body's responses. The headache had dulled to a manageable throb, and the scratches on my arms and legs had been cleaned and bandaged while I slept. Someone, Kieran, had taken care of me with a thoroughness that spoke of experience with injuries. The clothes he'd given me were clearly his own. The flannel shirt hung past my fingertips, and I had to roll the sleeves up several times just to free my hands. His scent clung to the fabric, that wild masculine smell that made something deep in my chest tighten with an awareness I didn't want to examine too closely. "You're awake." I looked up to find him standing in the doorway, holding a steaming mug. He'd changed clothes. Dark jeans that hung low on his hips and a gray thermal shirt that clung to his chest in ways that made my mouth go dry. His hair was damp, as if he'd been outside in the rain. "How long did I sleep?" I asked, accepting the mug gratefully. The liquid inside was herbal tea, warm and soothing against my raw throat. "About 12 hours. He settled into the chair again, maintaining that careful distance between us. "Your body needed the rest." 12 hours. Marcus would have had time to organize search parties, to call in favors from law enforcement connections. The thought made my stomach clench with anxiety. "Hey." Kieran's voice was gentle, concerned. "Where did you just go?" I blinked at him, startled by his perceptiveness. "What do you mean?" "Your scent changed. Fear, sharp and bitter." He paused, as if realizing what he'd said. "You looked afraid. Your scent changed. Normal people didn't talk like that." Normal people couldn't detect emotions through smell. But then again, nothing about Kieran seemed particularly normal. "I was thinking about what happens when the storm ends," I admitted quietly. "And what happens then?" I took a sip of tea, buying myself time. How much could I tell him? How much did I dare trust a stranger, even one who'd saved my life? "The people looking for me won't give up easily," I said finally. "People?" There was something sharp in his tone now, predatory. "Or someone specific." The memory of Marcus's hands, on me, the cold fury in his eyes when I'd pulled away during our first dance rehearsal, made me shudder. "Someone specific." Kieran leaned forward, his golden eyes intense. "Tell me." It wasn't a request. There was authority in his voice, the kind that made you want to obey without question. But I'd spent months being ordered around, being told what to do and think and feel. I wasn't ready to submit to anyone else's will, no matter how compelling. "Why should I?" I asked, meeting his gaze directly. "You won't even tell me how you knew my name." Something like approval flickered across his features. "Fair enough." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Your wedding announcement was in the social pages of every newspaper in the state. Arya Blackwood, marrying Marcus Blackwood of Blackwood Industries." The surname hit me like a physical blow. I never took his name. I'm Arya Chen." "But you were supposed to." It wasn't a question. I was supposed to do a lot of things. The bitterness in my voice surprised me. I was supposed to smile and look grateful. I was supposed to ignore the way he looked at me like I was a possession he'd acquired. I was supposed to pretend that an arranged marriage for business purposes was romantic. Kieran's expression darkened. Arranged? My family's company was failing. Marcus offered to buy our debt, merge our businesses, make the problems disappear. All for the low price of one unwilling bride. I set down the mug with shaking hands. My parents were so relieved, so grateful. They couldn't understand why I wasn't thrilled by the opportunity. And Marcus? The way he said the name made it sound like a curse. Marcus made it clear that he expected complete obedience from his wife. In all things. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the warmth of the fire. When I tried to set boundaries, when I said I needed time to get to know him better before we became intimate, he told me that wasn't how our arrangement worked. A sound rumbled from Kieran's chest. Low, dangerous, barely human. When I looked at him, his eyes had gone from golden to amber, almost glowing in the firelight. He touched you, he said, and it wasn't a question. He tried to. The words came out small, ashamed, though I knew the shame wasn't mine to carry. At the rehearsal dinner, he'd been drinking and he said he was tired of waiting, that we were as good as married already. When I pushed him away, he grabbed my wrist so hard he left bruises. Kieran was on his feet before I could blink, pacing to the window with movements that were too fluid, too controlled. His hands were clenched at his sides, and I could see the tension radiating through his entire body. That's when you decided to run, he said without turning around. That's when I knew I'd rather die than let him touch me again. He spun around then, his eyes blazing. Don't say that. The vehemence in his voice startled me. What? Don't say you'd rather die. Don't even think it. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, stopping just short of the bed. You're stronger than that. Braver. You proved it by running. I proved I'm a coward who left my family to deal with the consequences. You proved you're a survivor. His voice was fierce, absolute. You chose freedom over security, truth over comfort. That takes courage most people never find. The way he looked at me when he said it, like I was something precious, something worth protecting, made my chest tight with emotion I couldn't name. When was the last time someone had looked at me like that? When was the last time someone had seen me as more than a problem to be solved or an asset to be acquired? You don't know me, I whispered. I know enough. He sat on the edge of the bed, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his skin. I know you'd rather face a mountain storm than a man who thinks he owns you. I know you're strong, enough to walk away from everything you've ever known, rather than accept a life that would destroy your spirit. How can you be so sure? His smile was soft, almost sad. Because I recognize a kindred spirit when I see one. There was something in his voice, a depth of pain that spoke of his own battles, his own sacrifices. I found myself leaning closer, drawn by the vulnerability he was trying to hide. What did you run from? I asked quietly. For a moment, I thought he might actually answer. His guard dropped, and I saw something raw and wounded in those golden eyes. But then he pulled back, both physically and emotionally, that careful control sliding back into place. That's a story for another time, he said, standing up. Right now, you need to eat something. You haven't had a real meal in over a day. I wanted to push, to demand the same honesty I'd given him. But I could see the walls going back up, the distance he was creating to protect himself. I understood that need all too well. Kieran? He paused in the doorway, looking back at me. Thank you. For saving me. For not asking questions I'm not ready to answer. I struggled for the right words. For seeing me. Something shifted in his expression, became almost tender. Thank you for trusting me enough to let me. He disappeared into the kitchen, leaving me alone with the fire and the storm, and the growing certainty that I was falling for a man who was as much a mystery as the golden eyes that had watched me from the forest. Outside, the wind howled like something wild and lonely, calling to whatever darkness lived in the mountains. And despite the warmth of the cabin, despite Kieran's presence, I couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was just the beginning of something much more dangerous. Chapter 3. Hunger and heat. The smell of bacon and eggs drew me from the bed an hour later, my stomach cramping with sudden, desperate hunger. I hadn't realized how empty I was until the scent hit me, rich and savory and entirely too tempting to ignore. I found Kieran in the kitchen, standing at an old cast-iron stove with his back to me. The thermal shirt clung to his broad shoulders, and I could see the play of muscle beneath the fabric as he moved. There was something hypnotic about watching him cook, something domestic and intimate that made my chest warm in ways that had nothing to do with the nearby fire. "Smells incredible," I said, hovering uncertainly in the doorway. He glanced over his shoulder, and something in his expression softened when he saw me. "Sit. It's almost ready." The small kitchen table was already set for two, complete with mismatched plates and cloth napkins that looked handmade. Someone had taken care with the details, made an effort to create something welcoming despite the rustic surroundings. "You didn't have to go to all this trouble," I said, settling into one of the wooden chairs. "When's the last time you had a real meal?" he asked, sliding a plate in front of me. "And don't say yesterday. I can tell by looking at you that you've been surviving on nerves and coffee for weeks." He was right, of course. The stress of the impending wedding had killed my appetite completely. My dress had needed to be taken in twice just to fit properly by the ceremony date. "How can you tell?" I asked, then immediately wondered if I really wanted to know the answer. Kieran settled across from me with his own plate, and I noticed he'd piled on twice as much food as he'd given me. "You're too thin, too pale, and there are shadows under your eyes that speak of chronic exhaustion. You're very observant. I notice things that matter." His golden eyes met mine across the table. "Eat." There was that authority again, that quiet command that made something deep in my belly clench with awareness. I picked up my fork, partly to appease him and partly because the eggs looked perfectly fluffy, and I was genuinely starving. The first bite was heaven. Rich and buttery and seasoned with herbs I couldn't identify, but that tasted like they'd been grown in mountain soil. I couldn't suppress the small sound of pleasure that escaped me. Kieran went very still across from me, his own fork halfway to his mouth. When I looked up, his eyes had darkened to amber again, and there was something predatory in his expression that made my pulse spike. "Good?" he asked, his voice rougher than before. "Amazing." I took another bite, then another, suddenly ravenous. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" "Necessity. When you live alone in the mountains, you either learn to take care of yourself, or you don't survive." "How long have you been out here?" He was quiet for a moment, chewing thoughtfully. 5 years, maybe 6. Time moves differently when you're not tied to clocks and calendars. "That's a long time to be alone." Something flickered across his features. Pain, maybe, or longing. Sometimes alone is safer. I understood that feeling more than I cared to admit. Safer for you, or safer for everyone else? His fork clattered against his plate, and he looked at me with something like shock. "What makes you ask that?" I shrugged, trying to appear casual even though my heart was hammering. "Just a feeling. You seem like someone who's carrying a lot of weight. Someone who's convinced himself he's dangerous." Maybe I am dangerous. The words should have frightened me. Should have sent me running back to the bedroom to barricade the door. Instead, they sent a thrill of excitement through my veins that I didn't want to examine too closely. "To me?" I asked quietly. He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes searching, my face as if looking for some hidden truth. "I don't know," he said finally. "That's what scares me." The honesty in his voice, the vulnerability he was trying so hard to hide, made my chest tight with emotion. I reached across the table without thinking, covering his hand with mine. His skin was impossibly warm, almost fevered, and I could feel the strength in his fingers even as he held himself carefully still beneath my touch. There were calluses on his palms, scars along his knuckles that spoke of a hard life lived with his hands. "I'm not afraid of you," I said, and meant it. "You should be." But he didn't pull away. If anything, his hand turned beneath mine, his fingers curling around my palm. "You have no idea what I'm capable of. Then tell me." "I can't or won't." His thumb traced across my knuckles, sending shivers up my arm. "Both." We sat like that for a moment, hands linked across the table, the storm still raging outside. There was something electric in the air between us, something that made my skin feel too tight and my breathing shallow. "Kieran," I started, but was cut off by a sound that made my blood freeze. Howling. Close. Too close. Kieran was on his feet instantly, his hand sliding away from mine as he moved to the window. His entire body was tense, alert, like a predator, scenting danger on the wind. "What is it?" I whispered. "Wolves," he said. But there was something in his voice that suggested it wasn't that simple. The howling came again, closer this time, and I could hear the individual voices now. At least 3, maybe more. They sounded huge, their calls echoing off the mountain walls with an otherworldly resonance that raised the hair on my arms. "Are we safe here?" Kieran's jaw was tight, his hands clenched at his sides. "Depends on what they want." "What they want?" I stood up, moving toward him. "They're just animals, right? Looking for shelter from the storm?" He turned to look at me then, and his eyes were glowing. Actually glowing, like molten gold in the dim light of the kitchen. "Arya," he said carefully, "I need you to go to the bedroom. Lock the door. Whatever. You hear? Whatever happens, don't come out until I tell you it's safe. I'm not leaving you alone. This isn't a discussion." The authority in his voice was absolute now, carrying a weight that seemed to press against my chest. "Go. Now." The howling came again, and this time it was answered by something else. A sound that was part growl, part roar, and entirely inhuman. It came from inside the cabin. From Kieran. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering against my ribs. Kieran? His eyes were fully amber now, glowing like fire in the dim light. His hands were shaking, and when he clenched them into fists, I could swear I saw claws extending from his fingertips. "Run," he said, his voice distorted, deeper than before. "Please, Arya, run." I ran. I made it to the bedroom just as something heavy hit the front door of the cabin. The sound of splintering wood echoed through the space, followed by voices, human voices, speaking low and urgent. "She's here. I can smell her." And him. He's with her. The Alpha won't be pleased. I pressed my back against the bedroom door, my hands shaking as I turned the lock. Through the thin walls, I could hear Kieran speaking to the intruders, his voice low and dangerous. "You're not welcome here. Neither are you, exile." The responding voice was cold, amused. "But that's not why we've come. If you're here for me, we're here for the girl." My blood turned to ice. They were here for me. Somehow, impossibly, they'd found me. "She's under my protection," Kieran said, and there was something final in his tone. Laughter echoed through the cabin. Multiple voices, all male, all carrying an edge of cruelty that made my skin crawl. "Your protection? You're nothing now, Kieran. Cast out. Packless. What could you possibly offer her that we can't?" "My life," he said simply. The silence that followed was heavy, electric. Then one of the intruders spoke again, his voice silk over steel. "That can be arranged." The sound that erupted from the main room was like nothing I'd ever heard. part snarl, part roar, entirely inhuman. It was followed by the crash of furniture, the sound of bodies colliding with walls, and underneath it all, a sound like tearing fabric or tearing skin. I slid down the door until I was sitting on the floor, my arms wrapped around my knees, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. Wolves at the door. Men who spoke of alphas and packs. Kieran's glowing eyes and inhuman sounds. And somewhere in the chaos of violence beyond the bedroom door, the terrifying realization that the golden eyes I'd seen in the forest hadn't belonged to a wolf at all. They'd belonged to something much more dangerous. Chapter 4. The Beast. Within. The sounds of battle raged for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Furniture crashed, glass shattered, and underneath it all, sounds that no human throat should have been able to make, growls and snarls, that seemed to vibrate through the very walls of the cabin. Then suddenly silence. I pressed my ear to the door, holding my breath as I strained to hear anything. Footsteps, voices, even breathing. Nothing. The quiet was more terrifying than the violence had been. "Kieran?" I whispered. So softly I wasn't sure I'd made any sound at all. No response. My hands shook as I reached for the door handle. He'd told me to stay put, to wait for his signal. But what if he was hurt? What if those men had taken him? What if they were waiting for me to emerge so they could finish whatever they'd started? Arya. His voice, rough and exhausted, came from just outside the door. Relief flooded through me so strongly my knees nearly buckled. "Kieran? Are you okay?" "I'm alive." A pause. "They're gone." I unlocked the door with trembling fingers and pulled it open. Kieran stood in the hallway, leaning against the wall as if he needed the support to stay upright. His clothes were torn, his thermal shirt hanging in tatters that revealed long scratches across his chest and arms. There was blood, his own, I thought, smeared across his face and hands. But he was human. Completely, obviously human. "Oh God," I breathed, reaching for him instinctively. "You're hurt." He flinched back from my touch, and I saw something like shame flicker across his features. "Don't. I need to clean up first." I looked past him into the main room and gasped. The furniture had been destroyed. Chairs overturned and broken. The coffee table split down the middle. There were deep gouges in the wooden walls. Too regular to be random. Too deep to have been made by human fingernails. Claw marks. "What happened?" I whispered. A disagreement. His voice was carefully neutral. They wanted something I wasn't willing to give. Me. Yes. I stepped closer, studying his face in the dim light. There was something different about him now, something wild and untamed that hadn't been there before. His eyes were still that, impossible golden color, but they seemed to glow with their own light. Who were they? People from my past. He pushed off from the wall, moving toward the bathroom with careful, controlled steps. People I thought I'd left behind. Kieran. I caught his arm as he passed, and his skin was burning hot beneath my palm. "What aren't you telling me?" He stopped, his entire body going rigid under my touch. When he looked at me, there was such pain in his eyes that it took my breath away. "Everything," he said quietly. "I'm not telling you everything." The honesty of it, the raw vulnerability in his voice, made my chest tight. "Then tell me now." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because once you know, you'll run. And He stopped, his jaw clenching. "I'm not ready for you to run." There was something almost desperate in his voice, a loneliness so profound it made my heart ache. Whatever he was hiding, whatever he thought would send me fleeing, he was terrified of losing me. "I've already done my running," I said softly, I ran from a life that was suffocating me, from a man who thought he owned me. I ran until I couldn't run anymore. And you know what I found? He shook his head. His eyes locked on mine. I found you. And for the first time in months, I felt safe. I felt seen. I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could build something real with someone who understands what it means to be afraid. His hand came up to cup my cheek, his thumb brushing across my skin with infinite gentleness. You don't understand what you're saying. Then help me understand. For a moment, I thought he might actually do it. His guard dropped completely, and I saw everything he was trying to hide. The fear, the longing, the desperate need for connection that he'd been denying himself. Then his phone rang. The sound shattered the moment like glass. Kieran stepped back, his expression closing off as he pulled the device from his pocket. The caller ID made his face go deadly pale. I have to take this, he said, already moving toward the kitchen. Kieran, wait. But he was already gone, speaking, in low, urgent tones to whoever was on the other end of the line. I caught fragments. She's safe. And they didn't get her. And, yes, I understand. When he returned a few minutes later, his expression was grim. We have to leave, he said without preamble. What? Why? Those men who were here, they're not going to give up. They'll be back, and next time they'll bring more people. He moved, past me toward the bedroom, pulling a duffel bag from under the bed. We have maybe an hour before they regroup. Where are we going? Somewhere safe, somewhere they can't follow. I watched him pack with economical movements, his hands steady despite the urgency in his voice. And where exactly is that? He paused, a bundle of clothes in his hands. There are people, my people, who can protect you. But Arya, once we go, there, once you're part of that world. He met my eyes. There's no going back to your old life. Not ever. The weight of what he was saying settled over me like a heavy blanket. No going back. No return to the world I'd known. Dysfunctional, as it had been. No chance of reconciliation with my family. No possibility of finding some other path forward. Just Kieran, and whatever dangerous world he was offering to share with me. What kind of people? I asked. People like me. And what are you, exactly? He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, without looking at me, he said, the kind of person your nightmares warned you about. My nightmares never warned me about golden eyes and gentle hands, I said quietly. They never warned me about someone who would cook me breakfast and fight a pack of strangers to keep me safe. He looked up then, and there was something heartbreakingly vulnerable in his expression. They should have. I crossed the room and took the clothes from his hands, setting them aside so I could frame his face with my palms. His skin was still burning hot, and I could feel a fine tremor running through him, as if he was fighting some internal battle. I'm not afraid of you, I said, echoing my words from earlier. You should be, he repeated, but his hands came up to cover mine. Maybe, but I'm more afraid of going back to a life without you in it. Something broke in his expression then. He leaned forward, resting his forehead against mine, and I could feel his breath against my lips. Arya, he whispered, my name a prayer and a curse all at once. Take me with you, I said. Whatever world you're from, whatever danger you're trying to protect me from, I'd rather face it with you than face anything without you. He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes closed, his breathing shallow. When he finally pulled back to look at me, there was something like wonder in his expression. You mean that? I mean it. He studied my face as if memorizing it, his thumbs tracing across my cheekbones. There are things about me, about what I am, that will terrify you. Then, we'll be terrified together." A sound escaped him then. Half laugh, half sob. "You're going to be the death of me, or the life of you," I said softly. His control finally snapped. He kissed me then, fierce and desperate and hungry, like a man who'd been dying of thirst and had finally found water. I melted into him, my hands fisting in his torn shirt, tasting the wildness on his lips and wanting more. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. His eyes were glowing again. That inhuman amber that should have frightened me, but only made me want to pull him closer. "We need to go," he said, his voice rough. "I know." But neither of us moved. We stood there in the destroyed bedroom, holding each other while the storm raged outside and something much more dangerous gathered in the darkness beyond. "Kieran? Yeah? When you're ready to tell me what you are, I'll be ready to listen." He pressed his lips to my forehead, and I felt him smile against my skin. I'm counting on it, little runaway. Chapter 5. Into the wild, the truck that came for us looked like it had seen better decades. Rust spots bloomed across the blue paint like metal flowers, and the engine coughed and wheezed as it climbed the winding mountain road. But it was warm, and it was moving, and most importantly, it was taking us away from whatever danger was gathering behind us. Kieran sat in the passenger seat, speaking in low tones with the driver, a woman with silver-streaked hair and knowing eyes who'd introduced herself simply as Elena. They spoke in a mixture of English and what sounded like another language entirely, one full of rolling consonants and growling undertones that seemed to vibrate in my chest. I pressed my face to the window, watching the familiar world disappear behind us. We'd been driving for over an hour, climbing higher into the mountains than I'd ever been before. The roads here were barely more than dirt tracks, winding between trees so ancient and massive they seemed to block out the sky. "How much further?" I asked, raising my voice to be heard over the truck's protesting engine. Elena glanced at me in the rearview mirror, her dark eyes assessing. "Not far now. Another 20 minutes, maybe 30 if the road gets worse." "It gets worse?" Kieran turned to look at me, and I saw amusement flicker across his features despite the tension that had been radiating from him since we'd left the cabin. "City girl? Guilty as charged." I managed a small smile. The most wilderness I'd experienced before yesterday was the botanical gardens downtown. "You'll learn," Elena said, and there was something almost maternal in her voice. "The mountain teaches those who listen." "And kills those who don't," Kieran added quietly. The conversation lapsed into silence after that, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the growing certainty that I was traveling toward something that would change my life forever. Every mile took us further from civilization, deeper into a world where normal rules didn't seem to apply. The truck lurched suddenly, throwing me against the door as Elena navigated around a fallen tree. In the distance, I could hear something that made my pulse quicken. Howling, like what I'd heard at the cabin, but different somehow. Multiple voices, calling and responding in complex harmonies that seemed to echo off the mountain walls. "They know we're coming," Elena said, and I caught the edge of satisfaction in her voice. "Who knows we're coming?" I asked. Kieran shifted in his seat, suddenly tense again. "My family." The word hung in the air between us, heavy with implications I didn't understand. Family. Not friends, not allies. Family. But the way he said it, with such careful control, suggested it was more complicated than a simple homecoming. "Will they—" I struggled for the right words. "Will they accept me?" Elena's laugh was rich and warm. "Child, you're alive, aren't you? That tells us everything we need to know about how Kieran feels about you, and if our exile has claimed you." She met my eyes in the mirror. "Well, that makes you pack, whether you understand what that means or not. Exile, The word hit me like a physical blow. The men at the cabin had called him that too. Exile, Packless. Kieran had been cast out from these people. Banished for some reason he hadn't shared with me. "What did you do?" I asked quietly, leaning forward to study his profile. His jaw tightened. What I thought was right at the time. And now? Now I'm not sure right and wrong are as simple as I used to believe. The truck crested a hill, and suddenly the landscape opened up before us. A hidden valley nestled between towering peaks, dotted with cabins and smoke rising from multiple chimneys. It looked like something out of a fairy tale, isolated and perfect, and completely removed from the modern world. But it was the people that made my breath catch. Even from this distance, I could see them moving through the settlement with fluid grace, and there was something about their movements, something about the way they carried themselves, that set off every primitive alarm in my brain. Predators. Every single one of them moved like a predator. "Welcome to Haven," Elena said, guiding the truck down a narrow path toward the largest of the cabins, our home for the last 150 years. 150 years? I repeated faintly. Give or take a decade. She parked near what looked like a communal area and turned to face me fully. "Arya, that is your name, isn't it? There are things you need to understand before we go any further." Kieran's hand found mine, his fingers intertwining with mine in a grip that was both comforting and possessive. "Elena, no." Her voice carried absolute authority. "She's chosen to come here, chosen to be part of this. She deserves to know what that means before she takes another step." My mouth had gone dry, but I managed to nod. "Tell me." Elena studied me for a long moment, as if weighing something in her mind. Then she said, "We are not entirely human, child. None of us. We are something older, something wilder. We are wolves who walk in human skin, bound by laws older than civilization." The words should have sounded insane. Should have sent me scrambling for the truck door, demanding to be taken back to the world I understood. Instead, they settled into place like puzzle pieces I'd been trying to fit together since the moment I'd seen golden eyes watching me from the forest. "Werewolves," I said quietly. "Shifters," Kieran corrected. "The wolf is part of us, not a curse or a disease. It's who we are." I looked at him, really looked at him, and suddenly everything made sense. The impossible strength, the enhanced senses, the way he'd spoken about scents and pack and territory, the inhuman sounds during the fight at the cabin. "You saved me," I whispered, "when I was lost in the storm. You found me as a wolf." He nodded, his thumb tracing across my knuckles. "I heard you running. Scared, alone, hypothermic. My wolf." He paused, searching for words. "He wanted to protect you before I even knew who you were. And the men who came to the cabin? Scouts from my former pack. They want me back, and they think taking you will force my hand." "Why?" The question came out sharper than I'd intended. "Why do they want you back so badly?" Elena and Kieran exchanged a look that was heavy with unspoken communication. Finally, Elena sighed. "Because he's not just any wolf, child. He's an alpha, born to lead, bred for command. And his former pack is struggling without him. Alpha." The word sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with cold. It explained so much. The natural authority in his voice, the way others deferred to him even when he was trying to be gentle, the protective instincts that seemed to override his common sense. "What did you do?" I asked again, this time understanding that the answer would be more complex than a simple mistake. Kieran was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with old pain. I challenged my father's decision to ally with a pack that was slaughtering humans. When the council sided with him, when they chose politics over principle. He met my eyes. I walked away. An alpha can't remain in a pack he can't respect. And they exiled you for it. They exiled me for refusing to accept their authority, for choosing my conscience over my bloodline. The pieces were falling into place now, creating a picture that was both clearer and more complicated than I'd imagined. Kieran wasn't just a shifter, he was shifter royalty, an alpha who'd given up everything rather than compromise his principles. So, when those men said their alpha wouldn't be pleased, they were talking about my father, he confirmed. And they were right. He's not pleased that his heir is still running around loose, making his own decisions. A movement outside the truck caught my attention. People, shifters, were emerging from the cabins, moving toward us with casual interest. Men and women of all ages, but all sharing that same predatory grace, that same inhuman awareness. They're beautiful, I breathed. Elena smiled. We are that. But we're also dangerous, child. Never forget that. Even the gentlest among us carries claws and fangs and instincts that go back to the dawn of time. Are you trying to scare me? I'm trying to prepare you. Her expression softened. Because once you step out of this truck, once you're formally introduced to the pack, there's no pretending you don't know. No going back to your human life and forgetting what you've seen. I looked at Kieran, studying his face in the late afternoon. Light. He was tense, worried, clearly afraid that I'd change my mind now that I knew the truth. But underneath the fear, I could see hope. Desperate, fragile hope that I'd choose him anyway. Will it hurt? I asked. The transformation? If I wanted to become like you? Both Kieran and Elena went very still. Arya, Kieran said carefully, that's not how it works. You can't become a shifter. You're either born to it or you're not. But you could claim me. That's what Elena said. That you'd claimed me. Elena's eyes had gone wide. Child, do you understand what you're asking? I'm asking to belong somewhere, to someone. I'm asking for a family that won't sell me to the highest bidder, and a life where I get to make my own choices. I squeezed Kieran's hand. I'm asking for him. Kieran's eyes had gone molten gold again, and I could feel the tension radiating from him like heat from a fire. A claiming bond is permanent, unbreakable. You'd be tied to me, to all of us, for the rest of your life. And you'd be tied to me. Yes. Then yes, I said simply. If you'll have me. The sound that escaped him was part growl, part whimper, entirely inhuman. Before I could react, he'd pulled me across the seat and into his arms, burying his face in my hair. Are you sure? He whispered against my. Chapter 6. Trial by Fire. The first shifter to approach us was a woman who looked to be in her 30s, with auburn hair that caught the late afternoon light and eyes the color of warm honey. She moved with the same predatory grace as the others, but there was something warmer about her, more approachable. So, she said, stopping just outside what I was beginning to recognize as personal space boundaries. This is the human who has our prodigal alpha all twisted up. Kieran's arm tightened around my waist. Arya, meet Maya. Maya, this is Arya Chen. Maya's eyes flicked between us, taking in the possessive way Kieran held me and the way I instinctively pressed closer to his side. A slow smile spread across her face. Oh, this is going to be fun, she said. Welcome to Haven, Arya. I'm the Pax healer, which means I'll probably be seeing a lot of you while you adjust. Adjust to what? I asked, though part of me already suspected the answer. To living among predators, said a new voice, male and considerably less welcoming than Maya's had been. The man who'd spoken was tall and lean, with dark hair and pale blue eyes that seemed to look right through me. Unlike the others, he radiated hostility, his stance aggressive despite the casual way he leaned against a nearby tree. "Marcus," Kieran said, and there was warning in his voice. "What?" "She should know what she's getting into." Marcus pushed off from the tree and stalked closer, and I had to fight every instinct not to step backward. "You think because you've got our exile wrapped around your little finger that we're all going to just roll over and accept you? Marcus." This time it was Elena who spoke, her voice carrying such authority that Marcus actually flinched. "Enough. She's human," he said, but his voice had lost some of its edge. "Weak. Fragile. What happens the first time someone loses control? Around her? What happens when she sees what we really are?" "I already know what you are," I said quietly, finding my voice despite the fear crawling up my throat. "And I chose to come here anyway." Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You know nothing. You've seen Kieran on his best behavior, all controlled and civilized. You haven't seen him hunt. You haven't seen him kill. You haven't seen what happens when the wolf takes over and the human part goes quiet." "That's enough," Kieran snarled, and the sound that came from his throat was definitely not human. The air around us suddenly felt electric, charged with tension that made the hair on my arms stand up. Other shifters had begun to gather, drawn by the confrontation, and I could feel their eyes on us like physical weight. "Actually," said another voice, this one calm and measured, "I think Marcus raises some valid concerns." The woman who'd spoken was older, maybe 50, with silver threading through her dark hair and eyes like chips of green ice. She carried herself with the kind of authority that suggested she was used to being obeyed, and when she looked at me, I felt like a specimen under a microscope. "Anna," Elena said, and I caught the warning in her tone. "No, it's all right," Anna said, never taking her eyes off me. "The girl should understand what she's asking for." She took a step closer, and I had to steel myself not to retreat. Acclaiming, "Bond isn't just about love and romance, child. It's about survival. When you're bonded to an alpha, you become a target. Every enemy he's ever made, every rival who wants his position, every pack that sees him as a threat, they'll all see you as a weakness to exploit. I'm not weak," I said, lifting my chin despite the fear coursing through my veins. "Compared to us? Yes, you are." Her voice was matter-of-fact, not cruel but not kind either. "You can't fight like we can. You can't heal like we can. You can't even sense danger the way we can. In a world where strength is survival, what exactly do you bring to the table?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Around us, the gathered shifters waited to see how I would respond, and I could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on me. "I bring him peace," I said finally, looking directly at Anna. "I bring him a reason to come home." Something flickered in her expression, surprise maybe, or approval. Behind me, I felt Kieran go very still. "And what makes you think that's enough?" Marcus demanded. "Because I've seen what he's like without it," I said, turning to face him. "I've seen the loneliness in his eyes, the way he carries himself like he's been wounded. I've seen what exile has cost him, and I know what it means that he's willing to risk everything to protect me." "Pretty words," Anna said, "but words won't stop bullets. Words won't heal wounds. Words won't keep you alive when someone decides to use you against him." "No," I agreed. "But I'm not just words. I'm someone who walked away from everything I'd ever known rather than accept a life that would destroy my spirit. I'm someone who chose to trust a stranger in a storm rather than go back to safety that came with a price I wasn't willing to pay. I'm someone who's standing here, knowing exactly what you all are, and choosing to stay anyway." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Marcus seemed taken aback by the steel in my voice. "She has a point," Maya said quietly. "It takes a certain kind of strength to choose the unknown over the familiar. It takes stupidity, Marcus muttered, but his heart didn't seem to be in it anymore. Anna was still studying me with those penetrating, green eyes. And if the bond changes you, if being tied to an alpha starts awakening things in you that shouldn't be possible, what then? What do you mean? I asked. Sometimes, Elena said carefully, when a human bonds with a shifter, especially an alpha, strange things can happen. The magic that binds us, it doesn't always respect the boundaries between human and wolf. I felt Kieran tense behind me. Elena, she should know, Elena said firmly. If she's going to make this choice, she should understand all the possible consequences. What kind of changes? I asked, though part of me wasn't sure I wanted to know. Enhanced senses, mostly, Maya said. Stronger instincts. Sometimes minor healing abilities. Nothing dramatic, but enough to blur the lines. And sometimes, Anna added quietly, the bond creates a psychic connection between mates. Shared. Emotions, shared pain, shared danger. The implications of what she was saying hit me like a physical blow. If I bonded with Kieran, I wouldn't just be choosing him. I'd be choosing to share his burdens, his enemies, his very existence in ways I couldn't even imagine. Are you trying to scare me away? I asked. I'm trying to make sure you understand what you're agreeing to, Anna replied. Because once the bond is formed, there's no going back. No changed minds, no escape clauses. You would be his, and he would be yours, until one of you dies. I looked around at the faces surrounding us, some curious, some skeptical, some openly hostile. These people, these shifters, they would become my family, my pack. They would be the ones I'd depend on for protection, for acceptance, for belonging. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like coming home. Kieran, I said, not turning around but knowing he was listening to every word. What do you want? His hands settled on my shoulders, warm and steady and reassuring. I want you to be sure. I want you to choose with your eyes wide open, knowing exactly what you're getting into. And if I choose you, if I ask for the bond, then I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it. The simple sincerity in his voice made my chest tight with emotion. I turned in his arms, looking up into those golden eyes that had haunted my dreams since the night I'd first seen them in the forest. I choose you, I said clearly, loudly enough for the entire pack to hear. I choose this life, this pack, this bond. I choose all of it. The sound that escaped him was pure wolf, a howl of joy and possession and desperate relief. Before I could react, he'd lifted me off my feet and spun me around, and the laughter that bubbled up from my chest felt like freedom. When he set me down, the entire pack was watching us with expressions ranging from amazement to resignation to something that might have been approval. Well, Elena said, clapping her hands together, I suppose we should start preparing for a bonding ceremony. Wait, Anna said, raising a hand. There's still the matter of her trial. My blood went cold. Trial? Pack law, Marcus said, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked almost sympathetic. Anyone who wants to join the pack has to prove they belong, has to show they can contribute something of value. What kind of trial? Kieran demanded, his arm tightening around me protectively. Anna's smile was sharp as a blade. The kind that will show us exactly what she's made of. The sun was setting behind the mountains, casting the valley in shades of gold and crimson. In the distance, I could hear the first tentative howls of the evening hunt beginning. And somewhere in the growing darkness, I realized my real test was just beginning. Behind me, I could hear them following, their pursuit relentless and efficient. But I had one advantage they didn't expect, desperation sharpened by love. I burst into the torchlit clearing just as the first hints of dawn touched the eastern sky. The pack was still gathered, waiting, and I could see Kieran standing at the edge of the circle, his entire body tense with barely controlled violence. "I found them," I gasped, holding up the 3 carved wolves. "I found all 3. Anna nodded slowly. Second trial passed. Her gaze flicked to Marcus and his companions as they emerged from the forest behind me. "Though I see you encountered some complications." "Nothing I couldn't handle," I said, meeting her eyes directly. For the first time since I'd met her, Anna smiled, a real smile, warm and approving. "Indeed, which brings us to the 3rd trial." She walked to the table and picked up the final item, a simple wooden cup filled with dark liquid. "The trial of sacrifice," she said, holding the cup out to me. "This contains wolf's blood, mixed with herbs that will open your mind to the pack bond. If you drink it, you will be able to sense our emotions, our thoughts, our pain. You will be connected to us in ways that can never be broken." I stared at the cup, understanding the weight of what she was offering. "And the sacrifice?" "Your humanity," she said simply. "You will still be human in body, but your spirit will be forever changed. You will never again be able to live in the human world, never be able to pretend you don't know what we are. You will be pack, with all the responsibilities and dangers that entails." The clearing was dead silent, every shifter waiting to see what I would choose. I could feel Kieran's gaze on me like a physical touch, could sense his desperate hope and his willingness to let me go if that's what I needed. I took the cup from Anna's hands. The liquid inside smelled of copper and earth and something wild that made my wolf-touched instinct sing. "To the pack," I said, and drank it down in one swallow. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Emotions crashed over me like a tide. The pack's collective consciousness suddenly opened to me. I could feel their surprise, their acceptance, their growing respect. And underneath it all, burning bright and fierce and absolutely devoted, I could feel Kieran's love for me. "Welcome to the pack, sister," Anna said, and this time her smile held genuine warmth. But before I could respond, a new voice cut through the night, cold, commanding, and absolutely furious. "What exactly is going on here?" The pack parted like the sea, revealing a man who could only be Kieran's father. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with silver-streaked hair and golden eyes that burned with alpha fire. Behind him stood a dozen other shifters, all wearing the controlled aggression of a war party. "Hello, father," Kieran said, stepping forward to place himself between me and the newcomers. "Son." The word dripped with disappointment and barely contained rage. "I think it's time we had a talk." Chapter 7. The Trial of Trust. The trial began at midnight. I'd spent the evening in Maya's cabin, learning about pack customs and trying not to think about what lay ahead. She'd explained the basics. Trials were designed to test not just physical capability, but character, instincts, and the ability to think under pressure. They varied depending on the candidate and what the pack needed to see from them. "What do you think they'll make me do?" I asked, accepting another cup of the herbal tea that Maya insisted would calm my nerves. With Anna designing it, Maya's expression was thoughtful. "Something that will push you to your absolute limit. She doesn't believe humans belong in pack, hierarchy, so she'll want to prove her point." "And if I fail?" Maya was quiet for a long moment. "Then you leave. Tonight. No bonding ceremony, no second chances." The finality of it hit me like a physical blow. After everything, running from Marcus Blackwood, finding Kieran, falling in love with a world I'd never imagined, it could all end tonight with a single failure. "Maya," I said quietly, "what if I'm not strong enough?" She reached across the small table and covered my hand with hers. Her skin was warm, almost fevered like Kieran's, and I could feel the inhuman strength in her gentle grip. Strength isn't just about muscles and claws, Arya. It's about heart. It's about the will to keep going when everything inside you says to quit. Her honey-colored eyes were serious. You've already shown more courage than most people ever find. Trust in that. A knock on the door interrupted us. Kieran entered without waiting for permission, his face grim in the lamplight. "It's time," he said. The entire pack had gathered in a clearing at the heart of the settlement. Torches burned at regular intervals, casting dancing shadows between the trees and turning the familiar into something ancient and primal. The shifters formed a loose circle, their eyes reflecting the firelight like scattered stars. Anna stood in the center of the clearing, dressed in dark clothes that seemed to absorb the light. Beside her was a wooden table holding items I couldn't quite make out from this distance. "Arya Chen," Anna called, her voice carrying easily across the space. "Step forward." My legs felt like water, but I forced myself to walk to the center of the circle. The shifters' eyes tracked my movement, and I could feel their collective attention like a weight on my shoulders. "You wish to join our pack?" Anna continued. "To bond with our exile and claim a place among predators. But wanting and earning are different things entirely." "I understand," I said, grateful that my voice came out steady. "Do you?" She gestured to the table behind her. "Your trial will test 3 things: your courage, your cunning, and your capacity for sacrifice. Fail any one, and you will leave Haven tonight and never return." I swallowed hard. "What do I have to do?" Anna's smile was cold as winter moonlight. "First, courage." She lifted something from the table, a knife, its blade gleaming in the torchlight. "You must willingly shed your own blood to prove you're not afraid of pain." The blade looked wicked sharp, designed to cut cleanly through flesh. I stared at it for a moment, feeling the pack's eyes on me, waiting to see if I would balk at the first hurdle. I held out my hand. "How much?" Something flickered in Anna's expression. Surprise, maybe, or the first hint of respect. "Enough to prove your point." I took the knife, feeling its weight, its balance. The metal was cold against my palm, but I could feel warmth radiating from the shifters around me, their collective energy somehow lending me strength. I drew the blade across my palm in one quick motion. Pain flared bright and immediate, and blood welled up in the cut, dripping onto the earth below. Several of the shifters inhaled sharply. Apparently they could smell it, could scent my blood on the night air. "First trial passed," Anna said, taking the knife back. "Now, cunning." She gestured to the trees surrounding us. "Hidden in this forest are 3 tokens. Small carved wolves that have been scattered within a 1/4-mile radius. You have until dawn to find them. No help, no guidance, no light, but what the moon provides." I looked up at the sky. The moon was only a sliver, providing barely enough light to see by. The forest beyond the torches was a wall of impenetrable black. "And if I don't find them all?" "Then you fail." I nodded, wrapping my bleeding hand in the cloth Maya pressed into it. "And the 3rd trial?" Anna's smile became predatory. "That will depend on whether you succeed in the 2nd. Without another word, I turned and walked toward the tree line. Behind me, I heard Kieran start to follow, but Anna's voice stopped him. "She goes alone. Those are the rules." The forest closed around me like a living thing. Without the torches, the darkness was complete, so thick I could barely see my own hands. I had to feel my way from tree to tree, my bare feet silent on the carpet of pine needles and fallen leaves. Think, Arya. Where would they hide wooden tokens? I forced myself to be methodical, to move in a pattern that would cover the most ground efficiently. The carved wolves would be small, easily hidden, but they would also need to be findable. This was a test, not an impossibility. Tree hollows. That made sense. I began checking every hollow I could reach, running my hands carefully through rotted wood and accumulated debris. Nothing in the first dozen trees. A sound in the darkness made me freeze. Footsteps, trying to be quiet but not quite succeeding. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pressed myself against the nearest trunk, holding my breath. "She's close," a voice whispered. Male, unfamiliar. "I can smell her blood." "The Alpha won't like it if we interfere," another voice replied. "The Alpha isn't Pack anymore. His opinion doesn't matter." Fear spiked through me as I realized what was happening. This wasn't just a trial, it was a hunt. And I was the prey. Moving as quietly as I could, I continued my search, but now I had to balance thoroughness with speed. I could hear them out there, circling, tracking me by scent like the predators they were. The first token was wedged in the hollow of a massive oak, its carved surface smooth beneath my fingers. I tucked it into my pocket and kept moving, angling, toward what I hoped was the eastern edge of the search area. The second token took longer to find, hidden beneath a pile of rocks near a small stream. By the time I located it, I could hear my pursuers getting closer, their whispered conversations carrying on the night air. "She's moving toward the ridge. Cut her off at the creek." They were hurting me, I realized, using pack tactics to limit my options, force me into an area where they could corner me. The thought should have terrified me, but instead it made me angry. I was tired of being hunted, tired of being prey. The third token had to be somewhere in this direction. They wouldn't have hidden it outside the search area. But where? I'd checked every obvious hiding spot, every tree hollow and rock crevice I could find. Think like a wolf, I told myself. Where would a predator hide something? The answer came to me in a flash of intuition. Not where humans would look. Somewhere that required wolf instincts to find. Somewhere connected to their nature. I dropped to my hands and knees and began searching at ground level, looking for disturbed earth, for places where something might have been buried. The scent of rich soil and decomposing leaves filled my nostrils, and underneath it all, I caught something else, the faint musk of wolf. There, a patch of earth that looked recently turned, partially hidden beneath a fallen log. I dug with my hands, ignoring the dirt that caked beneath my fingernails and the way my wounded palm throbbed with each movement. My fingers closed around carved wood, the third token. "Found you," a voice said behind me. I spun around to find Marcus standing at the edge of the small clearing, his eyes glowing in the darkness. Behind him, 2 other shifters I didn't recognize emerged from the shadows. "Trial's not over yet," I said, getting to my feet slowly. "Isn't it?" Marcus took a step closer, and I could see the predatory hunger in his expression. "You found the tokens, but that was never really the point. The point was to see how you'd handle being hunted, how you'd react when faced with real predators. So, what now?" His smile was all teeth. "Now we see if you can make it back to the clearing alive." They moved faster than humans should have been able to, circling me with inhuman grace. I clutched the 3 tokens in my good hand, my mind racing as I tried to figure out a way out of this. I couldn't outrun them. They were faster, stronger, and they knew these woods better than I ever would. I couldn't fight them. I was one, injured human against 3 supernatural predators, but maybe I didn't have to. "You're afraid of me," I said, raising my voice so it carried clearly in the still night air. Marcus laughed. "Afraid? Of a weak little human?" "Afraid of what I represent. Afraid that if Kieran bonds with me, he'll remember what it feels like to have something worth protecting. Something worth coming home to." I took a step backward, closer to the trees. "You're afraid he'll be strong enough to challenge the pack structure you've built in his absence." "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" I smiled, hoping it looked more confident than I felt. You're terrified that an alpha with something to fight for is more dangerous than an alpha with nothing to lose. One of the other shifters, a woman with silver hair, stepped forward. Enough talk. She lunged for me, but I was already moving, diving sideways into the underbrush. Branches tore at my clothes and skin, but I kept going, crashing through the forest with no concern for stealth. Ronan's smile was slow and predatory. You think I won't? I think you're a lot of things, but I don't think you're stupid. I took a step closer to him, ignoring the way his claws extended in response. Kill me, and you make me a martyr. Hurt me, and you prove you're exactly the kind of alpha Kieran was right to walk away from. Let me go, and you look weak in front of both packs. So what exactly are you proposing? A bargain, I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. My life for his freedom. I'll come with you. Submit to whatever justice you think I deserve, and in return you leave Kieran and his pack alone. No, Kieran snarled, struggling to get to his feet. Absolutely not. It's not your choice, I said, not taking my eyes off his father. It's mine. Ronan was studying me with new interest, his head tilted like a predator considering unexpected prey. And what makes you think your life is worth more than my son's submission? Because without me, he has no reason to stay away. No reason not to come home and challenge you properly, with all the pack bonds and political maneuvering that entails. I smiled, hoping it looked more confident than I felt. But with me gone, with me safely under your control, he becomes just another exile. Harmless, forgotten. The logic was brutal, but it was also sound. I could see Ronan working through the implications, weighing the political advantages against his desire for immediate revenge. Interesting, he murmured finally. Very interesting indeed. Behind me, I could feel Kieran's desperate fury through the pack bond, could sense his absolute refusal to let me sacrifice myself for him. But I could also feel something else, the moment when he realized I was right. What's it going to be? I asked. Justice? Or just revenge? Ronan's smile was sharp as winter starlight. Oh, little human, he said softly. I think I'm going to enjoy getting to know you. Chapter 8. Blood and Betrayal. The Alpha's presence changed everything. The very air seemed to thicken with his power, pressing down on the gathered shifters like a physical weight. I watched as several of Haven's pack members instinctively lowered, their eyes, their bodies' language shifting to show submission. But not all of them. Elena stood straighter, her chin raised in defiance. Anna remained perfectly still, watching the confrontation with calculating eyes. And Kieran stepped forward, placing himself squarely between his father and me. You're trespassing, Ronan, Elena said, her voice carrying across the clearing with surprising authority. Kieran's father, Ronan, turned his golden gaze to her, and I saw something like amusement flicker across his features. Am I? This valley has always been neutral territory. I have every right to be here. Not with a war party, Anna interjected smoothly. Pack law is clear about armed incursions into neutral space. Armed? Ronan gestured to his companions with mock innocence. We are simply concerned family members, come to collect our wayward heir. The lie hung in the air like smoke. Every shifter present could sense the aggression radiating from Ronan's. People could smell the anticipation of violence on the night wind. I'm not going anywhere with you, Kieran said quietly. No? Ronan's voice was silk over steel. Not even to prevent unnecessary bloodshed? The threat was unmistakable. I felt the pack's collective tension spike through the bond Anna had opened. In me, their fear and anger washing over me in waves. But underneath it all, I could feel something else. Kieran's absolute determination to protect me, no matter the cost. There doesn't have to be any bloodshed, I said, stepping out from behind Kieran before he could stop me. Every eye in the clearing fixed on me, and I felt the weight of their attention like a physical blow. Ronan's gaze was particularly intense, his nostrils flaring slightly as he scented me. "Ah," he said, his voice holding dark amusement. "The human who's caused so much trouble. You're smaller than I expected." "Size isn't everything," I replied, grateful that my voice came out steady despite the terror coursing through my veins. Ronan laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Bold words for someone who has no idea what she's dealing with. He took a step, closer, and I had to fight every instinct not to retreat. "Do you know what happens to humans who get involved in pack politics, little girl?" "They usually end up dead," one of his companions said helpfully. "Ripped apart," added another. "Or worse," finished a third. I could feel Kieran's rage building. Through the pack bond, could sense him fighting to maintain control. Around us, Haven's shifters were tensing for a fight, their predatory instincts responding to the threat. "Is that supposed to scare me?" I asked, meeting Ronan's gaze directly. "Isn't it working?" "Not particularly." I took a deliberate step forward, ignoring the way several of his war party shifted into more aggressive stances. "You see, I've already faced down worse monsters than you. Have you now?" "Marcus Blackwood." I saw Ronan's eyes narrow at the name. He thought he owned me too. Thought he could use fear and intimidation to make me comply. It didn't work out well for him either. "Clever," Ronan murmured. "But cleverness will only take you so far." He glanced at Kieran, and something cold moved through his expression. "My son has always had a weakness for strays, lost things, broken things that he thinks he can fix." "I'm not broken," I said quietly. "Aren't you?" Ronan tilted his head, studying me with predatory interest. A runaway bride with daddy issues and a savior complex? A human so desperate for belonging that she'll drink wolf's blood and pretend she belongs among predators? Each word hit like a physical blow, aimed with surgical precision at my deepest insecurities. But through the pack bond, I could feel the others' support. Elena's maternal protectiveness, Maya's warm encouragement, even Anna's grudging respect, and Kieran. I could feel his love for me burning bright and fierce, untainted by his father's poison. "Maybe I am broken," I said, my voice gaining strength. "But I'd rather be broken and free than whole and caged." Something flickered in Ronan's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or the first hint of actual interest. "And you think my son offers you freedom?" "I think your son offers me choice. The chance to decide my own fate, fight my own battles, make my own mistakes." I glanced at Kieran, drawing strength from his presence. "That's more than I've ever had before." "Choice." Ronan spat the word like a curse. "You think you're choosing, but you're just trading one cage for another. The moment you bonded with my pack, you became a weakness. A vulnerability that every enemy will exploit." "Then it's a good thing I'm not bonding with your pack," I said. "I'm bonding with his." The silence that followed was deafening. Ronan's eyes went wide with shock, then narrowed with fury as the implications hit him. "You can't be serious," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "I am." Kieran stepped forward, his own voice carrying the unmistakable ring of alpha authority. "I'm forming my own pack, starting fresh with wolves who choose to follow me rather than submit out of fear." "You arrogant little..." Ronan's composure finally cracked, his voice rising to a snarl. "You think you can just walk away? Think you can steal my people and set up some romantic fantasy in the mountains?" "I think I can offer them something you never could," Kieran replied calmly. "A leader who puts the pack's welfare above his own. Pride." The insult hung in the air between them, father and son, alpha and exile. I could feel the tension building through the pack bond, could sense the moment when words would give way to violence. "Enough," Ronan said, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. "You want to play alpha? Fine. But if you're going to lead a pack, you need to learn what real leadership costs. He gestured to his companions, and they began to spread out, circling the clearing with predatory efficiency. Haven's shifters responded instinctively, forming their own defensive positions. "This is neutral territory," Elena said again, but her voice held less conviction than before. "Not anymore," Ronan replied. "The moment my son declared himself alpha here, this became a challenge, a contest for dominance." His smile was all teeth and promises of violence. "And I've never lost a challenge. You won't fight me," Kieran said, but I caught the uncertainty in his voice. "Won't I?" Ronan's eyes gleamed with malicious pleasure. "You're my heir, boy, my blood, but you're also a traitor who turned his back on his pack, his family, his responsibilities. That requires correction." "Father, no." Ronan's voice cracked like a whip. "You made your choice when you walked away. You made it again when you claimed that human. Now live with the consequences." The attack came without warning. One moment Ronan was standing 20 feet away, the next he was in motion, moving with inhuman speed and grace. Kieran met him halfway, their bodies colliding with a sound like thunder. They weren't fully human anymore. I could see it in the way they moved, the way their hands had become claws, the way their eyes burned with inner fire. They were caught, between forms, part man, part beast, entirely terrifying. Around us, the two packs erupted into violence. Snarls and roars filled the night air as bodies crashed together in a symphony of controlled fury. Through the pack bond, I could feel their pain, their fear, their desperate need to protect and survive. But all of that faded into background noise as I watched Kieran fighting for his life. Ronan was older, more experienced, with decades of alpha dominance behind every move. But Kieran was younger, faster, and fighting for something beyond mere territory or pride. He was fighting for me. The knowledge hit me like a physical blow. This violence, this bloodshed, it was all because of choices I'd made, because I'd chosen to run, to trust, to love someone I'd barely known. "Stop," I said, but my voice was lost in the chaos. "Stop." I tried again, louder this time, but they couldn't hear me over their own battle fury, couldn't see anything beyond the ancient dance of dominance and submission that had defined their kind for millennia. I did the only thing I could think of. I walked into the middle of the fight. The first shifter I encountered, one of Ronan's war party, barely had time to register my presence before I slipped past him. The second tried to grab me, but I was already moving, using my smaller size and unexpected behavior to navigate through the chaos. "Arya, no," Kieran's voice, desperate and afraid, but I was already committed. I reached the center of the clearing just as Ronan landed a devastating blow that sent Kieran crashing into a nearby tree. Blood streamed from cuts on his face and chest, and I could see he was favoring his left arm. "Enough," I said, placing myself between them. Ronan barely glanced at me. "Move, human. This doesn't concern you." "It's all about me," I replied. "You said so yourself. I'm the weakness, the vulnerability, the reason your son walked away." I spread my arms wide, making myself an unmissable target. "So here I am. Take me." The clearing went silent. Every shifter, from both packs, had gone still as death. "Arya," Kieran said, his voice raw with pain and terror. "Get out of here." "No." I kept my eyes on Ronan, watching as understanding dawned in his golden gaze. "This is my choice too. If you want to punish him for claiming me, then you have to go through me to do it." Chapter 9. The Price of Protection. Ronan's pack territory was nothing like Haven. Where Kieran's chosen family had built something warm and welcoming, this place felt like a fortress. All stone walls and watchtowers, designed to keep enemies out and inhabitants in. The main compound sprawled across a mountain plateau, its buildings arranged in precise rows that spoke of military discipline rather than organic community. I'd been here for 3 days, and I was already going quietly insane. "Eat," commanded. The woman sitting across from me in what Ronan generously called my quarters. Her name was Vera, and she served as both my guard and my keeper. She was beautiful in the way all shifters seemed to be, with silver blonde hair and ice blue eyes that missed nothing. I picked at the food on my plate, some kind of stew that actually smelled delicious but tasted like ash in my mouth. Everything tasted like ash these days. Ever since I'd been cut off from the pack bond that had connected me to Kieran and the others. The separation was like a constant ache, a hollowness in my chest that made it hard to breathe. I'd only been part of the pack consciousness for a few hours, but losing it felt like losing a limb. "The Alpha wants to see you," Vera said, setting down her own fork. "After you finish eating." "I'm finished," I said, pushing the plate away. "You've barely touched it. I'm not hungry." Vera's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Starving yourself won't bring him back, you know. Won't change anything that's happened." "I'm not starving myself," I lied. "I'm just adjusting." "To what?" "Being away from your mate." The word hit me like a physical blow. Mate. That's what I was, wasn't it? Or what I would have been if I hadn't thrown myself between Kieran and his father's claws. "He's not my mate," I said quietly. "We never completed the bonding ceremony." "Biology doesn't care about ceremonies," Vera replied, her voice gentler than I'd heard it before. "You're bound to him whether there was a ritual or not. I can smell it on you. His scent, woven into yours like threads in a tapestry." I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the fire crackling in the hearth. Can you tell how he is? Through pack bonds or whatever?" Vera was quiet for a long moment. "He's alive," she said finally. "Angry. And looking for you." Hope flared in my chest, bright and desperate. "He's coming for me?" "He's trying to. Ronan has tripled the patrols, set wards around the territory that would alert us to any intrusion." Vera's expression was carefully neutral. "Your exile is clever, but he's outnumbered 50-1. Even an Alpha can't overcome those odds." The hope died as quickly as it had come, leaving me feeling hollow again. Of course Kieran couldn't mount a rescue. I'd counted on that when I'd made my bargain with his father. The whole point had been to keep him safe, even if it meant sacrificing my own freedom. "Come," Vera said, standing. "Ronan doesn't like to be kept waiting." The Alpha's office was exactly what I'd expected. All dark wood and leather, dominated by a massive desk that looked like it could double as a fortress wall. Ronan sat behind it, reading through a stack of papers with the focused attention of a predator studying prey. He didn't look up when we entered. "Vera, you're dismissed." "Sir, dismissed." Vera hesitated for a moment, then bowed her head and left, closing the door behind her with a soft click. The sound felt like a death knell. "Sit," Ronan said, still not looking at me. I remained standing. "I'm fine where I am." That got his attention. His golden eyes lifted from the papers, fixing on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I said sit. The command hit me like a physical force, pressing against my will with the weight of Alpha. Authority. My knees actually buckled before I managed to lock them in place, fighting against the instinctive urge to obey. "Interesting," Ronan murmured, setting down his pen. "Most humans can't resist a direct Alpha command. But then, you're not most humans. Are you?" "What do you want?" I asked, proud that my voice came out steady. "To understand you." He leaned back in his chair, studying me like a puzzle he was determined to solve, to figure out what my son sees in a scrawny little runaway that's worth throwing away his birthright. "Maybe you should ask him," I'm asking you. Ronan's voice carried an edge of steel. What is it about you that made him walk away from everything? From his pack, his family, his destiny? I thought about it for a moment, really considered the question. What had drawn Kieran and me together? What had made us willing to risk everything for something that had started as chance encounter in a storm? I see him, I said finally. Not the alpha, not the heir, not the political pawn you want him to be. I see the man who cooks breakfast because he wants to take care of someone. The man who reads books by firelight and gets sad when he talks about being alone. The man who chose exile rather than compromise his principles. Principles. Ronan spat the word like it tasted bitter. Idealistic nonsense that has no place in the real world. Is that what you told him when he was growing up? That principles don't matter? That power is the only thing that counts? Something dangerous flashed in Ronan's eyes. Careful, little human. You're here on sufferance, not by right. I'm here because you made a deal, I shot back. My freedom for his safety. I kept my end of the bargain. And I've kept mine. He's alive, isn't he? Free to play at being an alpha with his ragtag collection of misfits and outcasts. Ronan's smile was cold. But that doesn't mean I have to make your stay here pleasant. The threat was clear, but I found I wasn't as afraid as I should have been. Maybe it was the lingering effects of the pack bond I'd shared, or maybe I was just too tired to care anymore. What do you want from me? I asked again. I want you to call him. The words hit me like ice water. What? Contact him. Tell him you've changed your mind, that you want to go home to your human life. Tell him whatever you need to say to make him stop looking for you. Ronan leaned forward, his predatory focus entirely on me. Convince him to move on. No. No? His eyebrows rose in mock surprise. You don't even want to hear my offer? I don't care what you're offering. I won't lie to him. Even if the alternative is spending the rest of your very short life in a cage? The casual way he said it, the matter-of-fact tone, made my blood freeze. But I forced myself to meet his gaze. Even then. Ronan studied me for a long moment, then threw back his head and laughed. The sound was genuinely amused, as if I'd told him the best joke he'd heard in years. By the moon, he said, wiping tears from his eyes. I'm beginning to understand what he sees in you. Which is? Spine, he said simply. Most people, human or shifter, would have crumbled by now. Would have said anything, promised anything, just to make the fear stop. His expression grew thoughtful. But you're not most people, are you? I'm nobody special. Just someone who got tired of being told what to do. Just someone who convinced my son to throw away his future for a chance at happiness. Ronan's voice held something that might have been grudging respect. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How few people in this world would risk everything for something as intangible as love? Maybe that's the problem, I said quietly. Maybe, if more people were willing to fight for love instead of power, the world would be a better place. Pretty words. But words won't protect you when other packs decide you're a weakness to exploit. Words won't keep you alive when enemies come calling. Then, teach me. The words slipped out before I could stop them, surprising us both. Ronan's eyes went wide, then narrowed with sudden interest. Teach you what? How to protect myself. How to be strong enough to stand beside him instead of behind him. I took a step closer to his desk, my heart hammering with sudden hope. You said I'm bound to him whether we complete the ceremony or not. That makes me pack, doesn't it? And pack takes care of its own. You want me to train you. I want you to give me the tools to survive in your world, to be worthy of the man I love. Ronan was quiet for so long I thought he might refuse. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. Training is not gentle, little human. It's brutal, painful, and more than half the candidates don't survive it. But some do. Some do, he agreed. The strong ones, the ones with enough, will to reshape themselves into something harder, sharper, more dangerous. Then that's what I'll become. His smile was slow and predatory, but for the first time since I'd met him, it held no malice, only anticipation. Very well, he said. We begin at dawn, but understand this. Once we start, there's no going back. I will break you down to your component parts and rebuild you into something that can survive among predators. The woman you are now will cease to exist. Good, I said, thinking of the frightened girl who'd run from her wedding, who'd spent months being told she was weak and helpless and valuable only for what she could provide others. I never liked her much anyway. Ronan's laugh was rich and genuinely delighted. Oh, I think I'm going to enjoy this far more than I should. As I left his office, I caught a glimpse of movement outside the window, a shadow among the trees that might have been a wolf, watching the compound with patient golden eyes. Hold on, I thought, pressing my hand to the glass. Just hold on a little longer. I had work to do. Chapter 10. Forged in Fire. 3 weeks of training with Ronan nearly killed me. Every dawn brought new tortures disguised as lessons. Combat training that left me bruised and bleeding. Endurance runs through mountain terrain that pushed my human lungs to their breaking point. Mental exercises designed to strengthen my will against alpha commands. And through it all, Ronan's voice, sharp as a blade, cutting away everything soft and vulnerable until only the steel beneath remained. Again, he commanded, circling me like a predator as I struggled to maintain my defensive stance. We were in the compound's training yard, dawn light painting the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. I wiped blood from my split lip and raised my hands. My body screamed in protest. Every muscle ached, every joint throbbed, and I was pretty sure I had at least 2 cracked ribs from yesterday's lesson in fighting dirty. Ronan moved like liquid lightning, his practice sword whistling through the air toward my head. I ducked, spun, brought my own weapon up to block the follow-up strike that I knew was coming. The impact sent shockwaves up my arms, but I held on. Better, he said, pressing his attack. But not good enough. He was right. Even with weeks of training, I was still pitifully outmatched against a shifter's speed and strength. But that wasn't the point, and we both knew it. The point was learning to think like a predator. To anticipate, to adapt, to survive against impossible odds. I feinted left, then dove right, rolling across the packed earth and coming up behind him. For just a moment, I had an opening. A clear shot at his back where even a human could do. Damage. But I hesitated. Some deeply ingrained instinct about not attacking someone from behind, about fighting fair, made me pause for just a fraction of a second. It was enough. Ronan spun, disarmed me with a casual flick of his wrist, and had his blade at my throat before I could blink. Dead, he said, his voice flat with disappointment. And do you know why? Because I'm human and you're not? Because you're still thinking like prey. He stepped back, lowering his weapon. In a real fight, there is no honor, no fair play, no rules except survival. Your enemy will use every advantage, exploit every weakness, show no mercy. His golden eyes bored into mine. If you want to survive in our world, you need to learn to do the same. I bent to retrieve my practice sword, using the movement to hide the frustration on my face. After 3 weeks of this, I was stronger than I'd ever been, faster, more aware of my surroundings. But I was still fundamentally human, still limited by biology and instinct that ran counter to everything Ronan was trying to teach me. I'm trying, I said, straightening. No, he replied. You're attempting. There's a difference. Before I could ask what he meant, movement at the edge of the yard caught my attention. Vera was approaching, her expression urgent. Sir, she said, not quite meeting Ronan's eyes. We have a situation. What kind of situation? Kieran. The name hung in the air like an electric charge. He's here, at the border, alone. My heart stopped, then started again in double time. Through the training, through the pain and exhaustion and slow transformation Ronan was putting me through, I'd never stopped thinking about Kieran. Never stopped hoping that somehow, despite the impossible odds, he'd find a way to reach me. "How did he get past the patrols?" Ronan asked, his voice deadly quiet. "He didn't try to sneak past them. He walked straight up to the main checkpoint and asked to speak with you." Ronan's eyebrows rose. "Asked?" "Very politely, from what I'm told. Said he had a proposition for you." I could see the wheels turning in Ronan's mind, could practically hear him calculating angles and advantages. After a moment, his mouth curved in what might have been a smile. "Interesting," he murmured. "Escort him to the main hall. Full honor guard. I want him to understand exactly how outnumbered he is." "Sir," Vera began, "should we just do as I said?" Ronan's voice carried absolute authority. "And Vera, make sure he knows the human as well. We wouldn't want him to do anything rash." Vera nodded and hurried away. I watched her go, my mind racing with possibilities. Kieran was here. He'd found me, despite everything. But why announce himself? Why not try stealth or wait for better odds or... "Stop," Ronan said, apparently reading my thoughts. "Whatever you're thinking, it won't work. This compound is a fortress, and my son knows it. He's not here for a rescue." "Then why is he here?" Ronan's smile was sharp as winter wind. "Let's go find out." The main hall was exactly what I'd expected from Ronan. Massive, imposing, designed to intimidate anyone who entered. High stone walls were decorated with weapons and trophies from centuries of pack conflicts. The Alpha's chair sat on a raised dais at the far end, more throne than furniture. Ronan settled into it with casual authority, while I was positioned to his right, close enough to be seen, but far enough to avoid any sudden moves. Around the hall's perimeter, his pack members stood at attention. 50 of the most dangerous predators I'd ever encountered, all focused on the main doors. When those doors opened, my breath caught in my throat. Kieran looked different, older, somehow as if the weeks of separation had aged him years. His face was leaner, sharper, and there was something in his eyes that spoke of decisions made and prices paid. But when his gaze found mine across the hall, everything else faded away. For just a moment, I saw him as he really was. Not the Alpha, not the exile, but the man who'd saved me from a storm and shown me what it meant to be truly seen. Then his mask slipped back into place, and he was all business. "Father," he said, his voice carrying easily across the stone space. "Son." Ronan's tone was carefully neutral. "This is unexpected, and unwise. Perhaps, but necessary." Kieran's gaze flicked to me again, and I saw his jaw tighten at whatever he saw there. The fading bruises, maybe, or the way I held myself differently. Straighter, more alert, more dangerous. "You've been training her," he said. And it wasn't a question. She asked to be trained. I obliged. Ronan leaned back in his throne, the picture of casual power. "Did you expect me to let her sit in her room, pining away for her lost love?" "I expected you to honor our agreement." "Which was?" "Her safety in exchange for my absence." "And she is safe," Ronan replied smoothly. "Fed, housed, protected, even educated in the ways of our kind. I've kept my word to the letter." Kieran's hands clenched at his sides, and I could see him fighting to maintain control. "What do you want from me?" "Want? Nothing. You've already given me everything I required. Your absence from pack politics, your withdrawal from territory disputes, your complete irrelevance to the balance of power in our world." The words were calculated to wound, and I saw them hit their mark. But Kieran didn't flinch. didn't give his father the satisfaction of a reaction. Then let her go, he said simply. Why would I do that? Because keeping her serves no purpose now. You've proven your point, that you can take anything I value, that I'm powerless to stop you. Mission accomplished. Powerless? Ronan's voice held amusement. Is that what you think you are? Isn't it true? Ronan was quiet for a long moment, studying his son with calculating eyes. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries of pack law. There is one way, he said slowly, that you could secure her freedom. Hope flared in Kieran's expression, quickly suppressed but not before I saw it. Name it. Single combat. You and me, alpha to alpha, for dominance of the pack. Ronan's smile was razor sharp. Winner takes all. Territory, followers, and the human. The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel the collective held breath of every shifter in the hall, could sense their shock at what Ronan was proposing. You're challenging me, Kieran said quietly. I'm offering you the chance to challenge me. There's a difference. Ronan leaned forward, his golden eyes gleaming. Of course, if you're not confident in your abilities, and if I lose, then you submit. Formally, publicly, permanently. You acknowledge me as your alpha, return to the pack hierarchy, and never question my authority again. And Arya remains my guest. Permanently. I wanted to scream, to throw myself between them and demand they find another way. But I could see the logic behind Ronan's offer, cold and brutal as it was. This had never really been about me. It had been about the challenge to his authority that Kieran represented, about a father trying to force his son back into a mold that no longer fit. I accept, Kieran said, and my heart shattered. Excellent. Ronan stood, his presence filling the hall like storm clouds. Tomorrow at sunset, then. The old circle with the pack as witness. His smile was predatory. It will be just like old times. As the hall erupted in murmurs and preparation, Kieran's eyes found mine one last time. In their golden depths, I saw love and determination and something else, a promise that whatever happened tomorrow, he wouldn't go down without a fight. Just hoped it would be enough. Because looking at Ronan, seeing the confidence in his stance and the satisfaction in his smile, I had the terrible feeling that my mate was walking into a trap that had been years in the making, and this time I might not be able to save him. Chapter 11. Blood Moon Rising. The old circle was a ring of standing stones older than memory, carved with symbols that seemed to shift and writhe in the flickering torchlight. According to pack legend, it had been here when the first shifters claimed this mountain, a sacred space where challenges had been fought and destinies decided for over 1,000 years. Tonight, it would decide mine. I stood with the gathered pack, forced to watch as Kieran and Ronan prepared for battle. The entire compound had turned out. Over 200 shifters forming concentric circles around the ancient stones, their eyes glowing like scattered stars in the darkness. He's going to lose, Maya whispered beside me. I hadn't expected to see her here, but apparently Ronan had extended invitations to several members of Haven's pack. Ronan's been alpha for 30 years. He's killed challengers half his age. Kieran's not a challenger, I said, my voice barely audible. He's his son. Which might make it worse. Ronan won't show mercy because of blood ties. If anything, he'll be more ruthless. This is about more than pack dominance. This is about a father proving he was right all along. I wanted to argue, to point out that Kieran was younger, faster, unburdened by decades of political maneuvering and compromise. But watching the two alphas circle each other in the stone ring, I could see what Maya saw. Ronan moved with the confident grace of a predator who'd never truly been challenged, while Kieran carried himself like someone who'd spent 5 years questioning everything he'd once believed. There has to be something we can do. I said. There is. Maya's voice was grim. We can hope your mate is stronger than his doubts. The formal challenge began with words older than civilization, spoken, in the ancient tongue that predated human language. I couldn't understand the syllables, but I felt their power resonating in my bones, in the wolf-touched awareness that Ronan's training had awakened in me. When the ritual words ended, both alphas began to shift. I'd never seen a full transformation before. Kieran had always been careful to maintain his human form around me. But now, watching him change, I understood why shifters inspired such primal fear in humans. His body elongated, bones cracking and reforming with sounds like breaking branches. His face pushed forward into a muzzle filled with teeth designed for tearing flesh. His clothes fell away as his skin sprouted thick, dark fur, and his hands became claws that could shred steel. But it was his eyes that held me transfixed, still golden, still unmistakably his, but now burning with an inhuman fire that spoke of hunt and kill and protect. Ronan's transformation was similar but somehow more terrible. Where Kieran had become a wolf, his father had become something closer to a force of nature. Larger, more massive, with silver-streaked fur and scars that told the story of dozens of battles won. They circled each other in the ancient ring, two apex predators testing for weakness, for opportunity, for the moment when instinct would override strategy. Ronan struck first. He moved like lightning, all teeth and claws and supernatural speed. But Kieran was ready, spinning away from the attack and raking his own claws across his father's ribs. Blood sprayed across the ancient stones, dark and hot in the torchlight. The pack erupted in howls and snarls, their voices rising to the star-filled sky in a symphony of violence and approval. Around me, I could feel their collective bloodlust, their primal excitement at witnessing a challenge that would reshape their world. But all of that faded into background noise as I watched the two most important males in my life try to kill each other. They fought like the immortal enemies they'd become, father and son, old ways and new, authority and rebellion made flesh. Ronan had experience and cunning, the kind of brutal efficiency that came from decades of defending his position. But Kieran had desperation and love, the fierce protective instincts of a mate fighting for his bonded female. It should have been enough, would have been enough, against any other opponent. But as the battle wore on, I began to see the truth that Maya had tried to warn me about. Ronan wasn't just older and more experienced. He was playing a deeper game, using tactics that went beyond simple combat. Every move he made, every attack he launched, was designed not just to wound, but to humiliate. He was dismantling Kieran piece by piece, showing the watching pack that their former heir was weak, untested, unworthy of the leadership he'd once claimed by right of birth. He's losing. Maya breathed beside me. She was right. Kieran was bleeding, from a dozen wounds, his movements slowing as blood loss and exhaustion took their toll. Ronan, meanwhile, seemed almost untouched. A few shallow cuts that only made him look more dangerous. No, I whispered, but even I could see it now. Kieran's guard was dropping, his responses becoming predictable. In another few minutes, it would be over. I'd made my bargain for nothing. Kieran would submit, become his father's creature again, and I would spend whatever remained of my life as Ronan's prisoner. Unless... The thought hit me like lightning, crazy and desperate, and completely against every rule of pack law. But Maya had said it herself. I might not be able to save him. She hadn't said I couldn't try. Before I could second-guess myself, I broke from the crowd and sprinted toward the ring. Shouts erupted behind me, voices calling my name, demanding I stop. But I was already moving, already committed. I vaulted over the low stones that marked the circle's boundary and landed in the sacred space where only alphas were allowed to tread. Both wolves spun toward me, their eyes blazing with surprise and fury. Ronan's massive head swung in my direction, his lips pulling back to reveal fangs that could tear me apart in seconds. "Stop," I said, my voice carrying across the sudden silence. "Both of you, just stop." The pack's howls died away, leaving only the sound of wind through the standing stones and the harsh breathing of two wounded predators. "This isn't about dominance," I continued, meeting Ronan's glowing gaze. "This isn't about pack politics or territory or who has the right to lead. This is about a father who can't let his son go and a son who's tired of fighting battles that can't be won." Ronan shifted back to human form, his transformation swift and controlled despite the wounds marking his chest and arms. When he spoke, his voice carried deadly warning. "You have no right to be here, no right to interfere in sacred law." "Don't I?" I turned to face the gathered pack, drawing on every lesson Ronan had taught me about thinking like a predator. "I'm pack now, aren't I? Bound to your heir by bonds older than your laws. If he dies, I die with him. Not literally, but in every way that matters." "Arya," Kieran said, his own transformation complete. He was naked and bleeding, his human form marked by claws and teeth. But his eyes were still that impossible gold that had haunted my dreams. "Get out of here. Please." "No." I kept my gaze on Ronan, watching for any sign that he might attack. "I won't watch you destroy each other over pride and stubbornness. There has to be another way." "What do you propose?" Ronan asked, his voice dangerously quiet. A real bargain. Not territory or submission, but truth. I took a breath, steadying myself for what I was about to say. "You want your son back? Fine. But you want him as he is, not as you think he should be. And Kieran, you want freedom? Then take it. Stop asking for permission to live your own life." "You think it's that simple?" Ronan's laugh was bitter. "You think family obligations can be dismissed with pretty words?" "I think love doesn't require chains," I replied. "And I think a father who truly loved his son would want him to be happy, even if that happiness didn't match his own plans." The silence that followed was deafening. Around the circle, 200 shifters waited to see how their alpha would respond to being lectured by a human female who had no business being in the sacred ring. When Ronan finally spoke, his voice was very soft. "And what exactly are you willing to sacrifice for this pretty dream of yours?" "Everything," I said without hesitation. "My safety, my freedom, my life if necessary. Because that's what you do for the people you love. You protect them, even from themselves." Something shifted in Ronan's expression, a crack in the mask of absolute authority he'd worn for so long. When he looked at Kieran, I saw something I hadn't expected. Not anger or disappointment, but grief. "You would really choose her over everything else?" he asked his son quietly. "Over pack, over family, over the destiny you were born to fulfill?" Kieran's answer was immediate and absolute. "Every time." Ronan closed his eyes, and for a moment he looked every one of his years. When he opened them again, something fundamental had changed. "Then I suppose," he said slowly, "it's time for this old wolf to learn some new tricks." Hope flared in my chest, bright and desperate. "You'll let us go?" "I'll do better than that." Ronan's smile was tired but genuine. "I'll give you my blessing, on one condition." "Which is?" His gaze shifted between Kieran and me, and I saw calculation there, but also something that might have been affection. "You complete the bonding ceremony, here, tonight, with the pack as witness." His voice grew stronger, more certain. "If you're going to be mated to my heir, you're going to do it properly, with all the ritual and recognition that entails." My heart stopped, then started again in double time. A bonding ceremony. Here, now, surrounded by the most dangerous predators in the territory. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like coming home. "Yes," I said, not taking my eyes off Kieran's face. "Yes, absolutely yes." Kieran's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains, brilliant and warm and full of promise. "Then let's get married, little runaway." I was packed now. I was mated. I was home. And for the first time in my life, I was exactly who I was meant to be. Chapter 12. Bonds of Blood and Moon. The bonding ceremony began immediately, as if Ronan was afraid one of us might change our minds if given time to think. Within minutes, the ancient circle had been transformed from a battlefield into something sacred and beautiful. Torches repositioned to cast warm, dancing light across the standing stones. Flower petals scattered on the blood-stained earth. The pack arranged in formal witness formation. Maya appeared at my side with a dress that seemed to materialize from nowhere. Simple white fabric that flowed like water, clearly designed for ceremonial purposes. I changed behind one of the larger stones, my hands shaking with nerves and anticipation. "Are you sure about this?" she asked as she helped me with the intricate fastenings. "Once this bond is complete, there's no going back. You'll be tied to him, to all of us, in ways that go beyond human understanding." I thought about it for a moment, really considered what I was agreeing to. A life among predators, a mate who could transform into something that haunted human nightmares. A world where power was measured in claws and fangs and the ability to inspire fear. "I've never been more sure of anything," I said. When I emerged from behind the stone, Kieran was waiting for me. Someone had found him clothes, dark pants and a simple white shirt that emphasized the golden tone of his skin. But it was his eyes that held me captive, burning with such intensity that I felt the heat of his gaze like a physical touch. "You're beautiful," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "So are you." Ronan had positioned himself at the center of the circle, having assumed the role of ceremonial leader. Around us, the pack waited in expectant silence, their eyes reflecting the torchlight like scattered stars. "Before we begin," Ronan said, his voice carrying easily across the stone space, "I want it understood that this is not just a union between two individuals. This is the joining of human and shifter, of mortal and immortal bloodlines. What we create here tonight will be bound by laws older than civilization." He gestured for us to approach the center of the circle. As we walked forward, I could feel the weight of pack attention, the collective consciousness that I'd touched briefly during my trial at Haven. But this time, instead of overwhelming me, it felt like coming home. "Kieran," Ronan continued, "you are Alpha-born, heir to bloodlines that stretch back to the dawn of our kind. Do you willingly claim this human as your mate, knowing that doing so will tie your fate to hers for all eternity?" "I do," Kieran said, his voice steady and sure. "And do you accept the responsibility of protecting her, teaching her, sharing with her the gifts and burdens of our nature?" "I do." Ronan turned to me, his golden eyes serious. "Arya, you are human-born, with no claim to our world by blood or birthright. Do you willingly accept the bond that will change you, knowing that you can never again live among your own kind as you once did?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. This was my last chance to walk away, to return to the human world, and pretend none of this had ever happened. But looking at Kieran, seeing the love and hope in his expression, I knew there was only one answer I could give. "I do," I said clearly. "And do you accept the responsibility of standing beside an alpha, of sharing his burdens and supporting his strength, even when it cost you everything you once believed about yourself?" "I do." Ronan nodded, then raised his hands to the star-filled sky. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of ancient ritual. Then let the bonding begin. What followed was unlike anything I could have imagined. Maya stepped forward, with a ceremonial knife, its blade gleaming silver in the torchlight. Without hesitation, Kieran held out his hand, letting her draw the blade across his palm until blood welled up in the cut. I offered my own hand, remembering the trial when I'd proven my courage by willingly shedding blood. But this time, when the knife bit into my skin, it felt like an offering rather than a test. Blood to blood, Ronan intoned as our hands joined, our mingled blood dripping onto the ancient stones. Life to life, the moment our blood touched, everything changed. Power rushed through me like lightning, not painful, but overwhelming in its intensity. I could suddenly sense every shifter in the circle, their emotions and thoughts pressing against my consciousness, like a tide. But stronger than all of that, burning bright and fierce in my mind, was Kieran. I could feel his love for me, deep and absolute and unshakable. But I could also feel everything else, his fears, his hopes, his memories stretching, back through years of loneliness and exile. I saw myself through his eyes, not as the frightened runaway who'd stumbled into his world, but as something precious and strong and worth fighting for. "The bond is forming," Maya whispered, her voice full of wonder. "I can see it, like golden, threads connecting your souls." Around us, the pack had begun to howl. Not the wild, chaotic sound I'd heard during the battle, but something harmonious and beautiful, like a choir of voices raised in celebration. The sound seemed to resonate in my bones, awakening something primal and wild that I'd never known existed. "There's more," Ronan said, his voice cutting through the pack song. "The blood bond links your life forces, but true mating requires something deeper." He gestured to Elena, who stepped forward carrying a goblet filled with dark liquid. I recognized the smell, wolf's blood mixed with herbs, similar to what I'd drunk during my trial, but somehow more potent. "This will complete the transformation," Ronan explained. "It will awaken whatever wolf spirit lives within your human soul, allowing you to share not just Kieran's thoughts and emotions, but his very nature." I stared at the goblet, understanding the magnitude of what he was offering. Not just a bond, but a fundamental change in what I was. The chance to become something more than human, something that could truly stand as Kieran's equal. Will I be able to shift?" I asked. "Perhaps. The magic affects everyone differently, but you will be stronger, faster, more connected to the natural world. You will live longer, heal faster, and never again be truly separate from pack consciousness." Kieran's hand tightened around mine. "You don't have to," he said quietly. "The blood bond is enough. We can be mated without—" "No," I interrupted, meeting his gaze. "I want all of it. All of you. All of this world you're offering me. I want to be your true partner, not just someone you have to protect." I took the goblet from Elena's hands and drank the contents in one swallow. The liquid burned going down, tasting of copper and earth and something wild that made my newly awakened instincts sing. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Heat raced through my veins, and I could feel my body changing on a cellular level. My senses sharpened until I could hear heartbeats from across the circle, smell individual scents woven into the night air, see details in the darkness that should have been invisible to human eyes. But more than that, I could feel the wolf. It was there, in the deepest part of my soul. Not a separate entity, but an integral part of who I was, awakened by the magic that flowed through the pack bond. I could sense its strength, its fierce protectiveness, its absolute loyalty to the golden-eyed male who stood beside me. "Look at me," Kieran said, his voice soft with wonder. I opened eyes I hadn't realized I'd closed and saw my reflection in his gaze. My own eyes were glowing now, not the golden amber of born shifters, but a silver white that seemed to capture and reflect the moonlight. "Beautiful," he breathed. The pack's howling reached a crescendo, then gradually died away into expectant silence. Ronan stepped forward, his expression mixing pride with something that might have been paternal affection. "By blood and moon, by choice and ceremony, I pronounce you mated," he said formally. "May your bond be strong, your love eternal, and your pack prosper under your protection." Then, more quietly, he added, "Welcome to the family, daughter." Kieran pulled me into his arms then, and the kiss that followed was everything I'd dreamed of and more. I could taste his relief, his joy, his fierce love for me, but I could also taste something new, the recognition that I was no longer the fragile human he'd rescued from a storm, but his true partner in every sense of the word. When we finally broke apart, the pack erupted in celebration. Shifters who'd been strangers an hour ago came forward to offer congratulations and welcome me as one of their own. Even Marcus, who'd been so hostile during my trial at Haven, offered a grudging nod of respect. "So what happens now?" I asked Kieran as the formal ceremony gave way to impromptu festivities. "Now," he said, his eyes bright with possibility, "we build something new. A pack based on choice rather than birthright, on loyalty rather than fear. We create a place where people like us, misfits and outcasts and romantics, can find a home." "Sounds perfect," I said, leaning into his warmth. "There's just one thing I need to know," he continued, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper. "What's that?" His smile was soft and full of love. "Are you ready for the honeymoon, Mrs. Alpha?" I laughed, the sound bright and joyous in the mountain air. "I've been ready since the night you found me in the storm." "Then let's go home, little runaway." As we walked away from the ancient circle, hand in hand and heart to heart, I felt the last pieces of my old life falling away like shed skin. The frightened girl who'd fled her wedding was gone, replaced by someone stronger, braver, and infinitely more dangerous.